I'm genuinely shocked it's taken this long to make another well-made Valentine's Day horror-esque film. I consider both George Mihalka's original 1981 My Bloody Valentine and Patrick Lucier's 2009 remake as really strong films, as both have their merits. Obviously, the original being such a simple classic that to this day very much holds up. And the remake, honestly, in my opinion, is one of the better horror remakes. It's filled with great performances. The 3D aspect doesn't bother me really because it's not really prevalent that much in the film. And 2001's Valentine's was just, no, I didn't like it, the mask was dumb, and the campiness didn't really work for me. So truth be told, it's about time we got another good holiday slasher. I liked Thanksgiving well enough, it was quite solid, but It's a Wonderful Knife just didn't work for me. The characters really weren't that likable, and I just couldn't really get invested in the plot. But luckily, Josh Rubin, who I'm not too familiar with his work to be honest, created Hard Eyes, which is a solid little film. I think what boosts the effect of the film for me is that the movie knows what it is. It's not trying to be this cerebral, over-the-top experience. It helps too that Christopher Landon helped write and produce this. I'm a huge fan of Happy Death Day, so I was hopeful that he was going to be able to keep that same energy here. I'm not going to say this was on par with Happy Death Day, because let's be honest, that would be silly. Happy Death Day certainly balanced the humor and horror much better, and the ending really pulled at your heartstrings in a truly surprising way. But Hard Eyes found its own cute, unique way of merging rom-coms with horror films. The premise follows the Hard Eyes killer who for the past several years has wreaked havoc on Valentine's Day by stalking and murdering couples. I do love that the movie doesn't make it feel like he's this new killer on the loose. I like that they took the approach of him already having this established notoriety as a menace that kinda just already exists in this world. Hard Eyes isn't even afraid of being seen in public, which isn't the most common in the slasher genre. So it helps with not even having to explain too much about who he is through exposition. He's kinda just this obstacle that our leads have to get around. And in general, you quickly realize that Hard Eyes isn't on screen that much. In fact, it feels like there's large chunks of this movie where you kinda forget you're in a horror movie in general. Because this film is primarily a rom-com with an occasional run-in with a murderous psycho. This is a slasher film that knows how to have fun. I mean, the villain is literally Evil Cupid. It's wacky and the movie leans into that wackiness. But that's not to say he doesn't have presence in the film. No, when he's on screen, he's dangerous, and you know eventually we're gonna have to deal with him. Side note, the look of Hard Eyes is fantastic. He reminds me of Trevor Belmont from Castlevania in a weird way. And he wears this like bounty hunter attire with heavy boots and what seems like unlimited weapons on him at all times. Plus, who doesn't love a good use of arrows in horror movies? I love when they're implemented, and the variety of weapons and kills in this film was really good. Even the night vision of his mask made him seem that much more prepared for pretty much anything. It's interesting because this movie kinda addresses the plot of other non-horror related rom-coms where two people meet and because of external bizarre reasons, they either need to pretend to date and fall in love, or they hate each other and then spend enough time together that they realize, oh, they're actually in love. If you really think about it, this film is the exact same, except that instead it's a bloodthirsty maniac who is the driving force for these characters to spend more time together and connect. And so the film does feel like it's playing the long game in the sense that it's focused on making you like these two characters first, and then it reminds you, oh by the way, there's a killer that's following them around. Jay and Allie, when on screen together, are really good because when they're spending time together and getting to know each other, it feels organic, while at the same time it's giving us a little bit of insight into who these characters are. Speaking of which, Olivia Holt did well enough, but Mason Gooding stole the show. He was fantastic. He really pulled off the hot, charming look. He was funny as hell too throughout the entire thing. There were a few moments that were just hysterical, like when he was mansplaining to Allie on how to break glass, only for him to end up being the one that was harmed. Or when he was petty that Allie abandoned him at a certain point, and she said, well, you're lean and buff, so you can handle yourself. And he replied by saying, these muscles are for cuddling, not for killing. There's even a sequence where the characters of Hobbs and Shaw are introduced, and I wish Mason Gooding would have been the one to be introduced to them, since he himself referenced Hobbs and Shaw in Scream, but that would have broken the fabric of reality, and that just would have been too meta, I guess.
Creepy as shit.
Probably time to introduce him to Hobbs and Shaw.
You'd see the projection just burn because of how meta that is. I truly do wish we had more screen time with Devon Sawa. It felt more like he was a cameo, but at least it was memorable because oof, that's tough. Delilah from The Faculty was a curious character. She loves playing those double-sided characters, so there's merit in that for sure. And while in general this film is certainly going for that feel-good vibe as a whole, it understood that if you're related to horror and you write in a dinner scene, that scene better hit. Dinner scenes are the bread and butter of horror. They always have the most tension and emotion involved that usually are used to reinforce the themes that the movie is trying to explore. Luckily, Ruben understood that, and my god, that first work dinner date was excellent. To be candid, I wasn't entirely sold on Holt's performance up until that point, but that clash of perspectives between her and Gooding was really good. Jay trying to be the optimistic guy that wants to fall in love with a person and prove the past wrong, while Allie is post-breakup, and you can tell she's not taking the holiday too well, so she's not too hopeful on the whole love thing. Also, while I wasn't a fan of the CG in the beginning, in particular with the squishing, I think in the second half of the film, the effects were surprisingly gruesome, especially with the arrow and the statue. This movie cutely sprinkled in plenty of eye candy of other iconic kills from other movies. The Platinum Dunes Texas Chainsaw Massacre shot was dope, the Halloween 2 lift was used, though that does come with an asterisk because we couldn't actually see the lift. I wish it would have had a wide shot to see the whole thing instead of it just being suggested. But it shows the benefits of having an R rating, which just lets the movie have fun with the gore. And sure, as a whole, it is another Scream knockoff, but as long as you take a pre-established idea and add interesting and engaging things to it, it shouldn't hinder the experience. And the movie does address dating culture and gives multiple experiences as examples, and it inoffensively takes a jab at how stressful the whole thing could be. And there's some things that don't entirely work for the film. I think the plot with Jay and Allie having to work together on a work project doesn't go anywhere because of how much time we spend throughout the movie having to get them to meet and connect, that by the end, you kind of just get a rushed summarization of, oh, this is the final product, and we didn't actually get to see them work together. The same goes with Allie's ex. The whole thing could have been removed entirely and it really wouldn't have changed anything about the movie. So because of that, some of the plot lines do feel superfluous. The coincidences that made it too obvious about the killer, especially the police station with the encounter of Hard Eyes and Shaw, or the fact that Jay should have literally died outside of Allie's apartment. But at the end of the day, in spite of its flaws, the film just leaves you with a really good feeling, to the point where you don't really care about the plot holes. To be honest, for most of the runtime, I didn't really care who the killer was because of how invested I was in seeing if these two characters are gonna make it work or not. If anything, I think it would have been better if the movie didn't reveal who the killer was at all. Leave it like an urban legend, and I think it would have been more effective that way. So overall, Josh Ruben is somebody that I'm definitely gonna have on my radar to see his other work. Do I think it's gonna be one of the best movies of the year? Probably not, but it is an enjoyable time, complete with a wholesome, corny ending scene. But that's it for me. I'd appreciate a thumbs up, subscribe, and sincerely yours, Anthony.